So kia ora koutou te whānau. My name is Brandy Alger. As Nicole so brilliantly introduced me, I'm an engineer. I work for Quake Corps, which is a Center of Research Excellence in Earthquake Resilience. And I have created a walking tour in the West End about the new earthquake resilient technologies. That's what I'm talking about today. I was really happy when I came up with this title. I was, for days, I was pretty excited. And then I Googled it because I was like, surely someone else has thought of it before. I couldn't find anything except for 20 pages about this pink nail polish from OPI called Nite Tectonics. I was pretty impressed with it, and I'm going to buy that nail polish. Cool. So that's my talk. Unfortunately, there's not really many drink-related puns after this, so don't get your hopes up. But I wanted to start out with who am I? First off, I really love obscure pop culture references, so see Leander on there. I am a self-professed nerd. I have an electrical engineering degree, a master's and a bachelor's degree in robotics, artificial intelligence, but I've worked in the last 7 years in New Zealand for Quake Corps, Center of Resilience, Center of, I can't think, Research Excellence. I don't know why they forgot that, I work there. In earthquake resilience, and also Quake Center, which is an industry-funded industry solutions for earthquake resilience as well. So through that job, I've created a walking tour of the CBD to showcase the amazing technology that Christchurch has to offer. One of the best things that came out of the earthquake was the new technology to keep Christchurch safe. So we wanted to highlight that through a walking tour with special thanks to Royce Liu, who's usually on my tours with me for the real extra nerdy people with the really hard questions. He's got a PhD in structural engineering. He's not here tonight, so please keep it easy. So Siaftify McGinnis is one of our students that helped create this walking tour into an actual app online, so everybody can do it themselves through a self-tour. And I've got, at the end, these little earthquake emergency kits, or detection kits. And on the bottom pointer is the QR for the walking tour. So if anybody wants one, really good at detecting when an earthquake is happening. Yeah, so there's one for everyone, and if you don't take them, that's okay. I know lots of nerds that will. Alright, so disclaimer, I love pub quizzes, and I also really love memes. So you'll find a little bit of both mixed into there. When they do come up, every quiz question does have a meme. I'll give you a second to read it before I get into this quiz question, because I know other nerds really want to get the questions right, but they also want to read the meme. So, first off, most people would think that this is a map of Christchurch. I agree. This is a map of Christchurch. You'll probably, the satellite view like this was before 2011. So most people know this kind of view before the earthquake. And you can see how dense the population is, except for Hagley Park. So a lot of Hagley and along the river. But then the satellite view after the earthquake, you'll notice a lot of empty spots. So this is this year in 2022. So you'll notice a lot of empty spots where buildings were, and a little bit of the red zone area. Hagley Park's still there, so that's nice. But a lot of the buildings have changed, and Christchurch has changed along with it. So, quiz time. Read that meme, everybody can see it. About how many buildings were, and then this is the keyword, demolished after the 2010-2011 earthquakes? Was it A, 100, B, 1,000, C, 10,000, or D, 100,000? So raise your hand if you think it's A, B, C, and D. Yeah, so most people are right. Yeah, it's C. Whoops. Oh, here. Kind of skipped the answer. Anyway, C. So 7,500 dwellings and 1,400 commercial properties. And if you want the paper, the research paper for that, I'm willing to give it to you afterwards. Let me know. My friend Rosa Gonzalez wrote it. It's pretty good. Give me a second for that meme before I go into the question. I actually had to make this meme because it didn't exist, and I thought it was funny. How many buildings were damaged by the 2010-2011 earthquakes? Was it A, 100, B, 1,000, C, 10,000, or D, 100,000? So A, B, C, D. Everyone's a winner. Yeah. So we had a lot of damaged buildings. Actually, I think it was, I don't exactly remember, it was like something in the billion tons of rubbish that went to the dumps after the earthquake, so lots of damage. So after the earthquake, Mayor Bob Parker put this quote out there. He said the ultimate goal is to make Christchurch the most earthquake-safe city in the world. It's not there yet, but I do think, being in Christchurch, we have the benefit of having the University of Canterbury, which is top 1% in the world for civil engineering. We have amazing civil engineering firms. We have Holmes, we have Stantec, WSP. So we have amazing engineers within the city. We also have a city that needed to be rebuilt. So it kind of made it into the perfect storm to help push that future of an earthquake-safe city. So I'm going to start with the tour. This little area is what they really want to push is the west end. So that's the west end of Christchurch, and that's where my tour is. We try to keep it pretty, can everybody see? Am I in the way a little bit? We try to keep it pretty local so that people don't have to walk too much. So within this little tiny area, lots of amazing buildings to see. So I'm going to start out with Te Puna Waifetsu, which is the Christchurch Art Gallery. So most people go to the art gallery to see the art. I've been there about 25 times in the last 2 years, and I've never been inside the building. The last 2 years I've always been outside looking at the structures. So the first thing I point out when people are there standing, and usually on top of this, the fact that this little part here, if anybody's ever noticed that in the Christchurch Art Gallery, looks a little bit off. This is actually what we call a seismic gap. And that, to me, showcases that the fact that this probably has base isolation in it. So this allows the building to move freely, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. So that's a telltale sign to me that there's probably base isolation. And so if you wanted to see it, you need to get under the ground. And to do that in the art gallery, it's actually pretty easy. You can go to this little box out here, go through the door, downstairs, through this door. So in the car park, you'll see all these really colorful pillars, about 140 of them. On top of each one of these pillars are these little black rubber things. Those are base isolation. So that's triple friction pendulum base isolators. You don't need to memorize that. So this is what the pillars look like, and this didn't have the base isolation before the earthquake, but it does now, so they retrofitted it after. So this is what the device looks like underneath the car park, and this is what it looks like inside of it. I don't know what a good place to stand. But basically, what a triple friction pendulum base isolator is if you've ever cooked with a cooking wok, it has that little concave. So think of 2 cooking woks with a Teflon coated hockey puck in the middle. And what it does, it allows it to slide pretty much frictionless side to side, kind of like it's dancing. So it's on every single pillar, and that means the base isolation comes into play where you're isolating the base of that building from the ground around it. So when you have shaking in the ground around it, that building is isolated and actually is going to dance more like in a controlled manner. So there's a really, and I don't know if this is going to work because I might have to skip ahead. Keep going. Don't have rockets. Okay, this is the part. So this is the base of the building, and they put the base isolators in there. This is the triple friction pendulum base isolators. And when the earth shakes around it, which we'll go in a second, the building moves in a more controlled manner, almost like it's dancing side to side. And you'll see a zoom in on that in a second when it goes in. So you'll see those 2 cooking woks with the hockey puck in the middle. And when it moves, it can move side by side, kind of like a skateboarder on a half pipe. So it just allows the building to move side by side in a controlled manner. Another way to think about it is another pop culture reference. The amazing live comedy or live act, the Super Mario Brothers from 1993. And when they're in the elevator with the Goombas, Luigi takes one of the Goombas and starts moving it back and forth. And eventually, like the pillars, they will all start moving back and forth together. So if nobody's seen this movie, that's okay. I know it's obscure. It's great. So this is what I imagine when the pillars go. So one of them goes, and then eventually, in a second, they'll all start moving together. It's born. So, just give it a second. I knew it was obscure. That's okay. So coming back to this little seismic gap, this is what it looks like on the top. And this is why I always tell people when I show people and they're standing on it, I'm like, you probably don't want to stand there. I'll tell you why after. So underneath, this is what it actually looks like. So it's a seismic gap, and with that base isolation, we need that freedom for that building to move side by side without hitting the ground around it. So that seismic gap is actually like a little lid that allows it to slide onto the ground around it. So on this side, if you look closely, there's these pins that are holding it to this side of the building, which is the art gallery, and this side is free to flow over it. So it just like is a little ramp that moves up and down, worst case scenario, and dances like those Goombas. So that's the art gallery. So quiz time. How many buildings in Ototahi Christchurch had base isolation before 2011? Was it A0, B1, C10, or D100? So how many people say A, B, C, D. Bit of a spread. It was actually only one. I don't know why it keeps disappearing. It's one. So only one building. Give me a second. And what building was it? Does anybody know?
Art gallery?
Wasn't the art gallery. Which one? Not the health center. Not the council building.
Women's hospital.
The women's hospital. Yeah. I think he knew that too. Yeah. This is my friend Chris, by the way. He's got a PhD in geotechnical engineering. This is the Christchurch Women's Hospital. Yeah, so before the 2011 earthquakes, only one building had base isolation. Now, it's hard to say because new buildings keep getting built, but roughly about 18 of them, maybe more now. So bonus question, and I'll let you read that one first. Why did they choose to retrofit? So they went in and put the base isolation in afterward. Why did they choose to retrofit the art gallery base isolation? Anybody know?
Several degrees headquarters.
Yeah, you would think so. So that's where the Urban Search and Rescue headquarters were after the earthquake. So all of the main people were there, St. John's, but no, that's not the main reason. It should be a good reason, but no. Anyone else?
Is it because art's expensive when it breaks?
Yeah, to insure the art. Yeah, it's to insure the art. So in order to get insurance for the art, they needed to put base isolation into the building. So not even to save lives or, it was an urban search and rescue area for after the earthquakes. It's to insure the art. Alright, so to move on, we started at the art gallery and then we're moving here from Hereford and Montreal Street to the Wynne Williams building. So this was the St. Elmo Courts. It was a residential building and then, residential, then it turned to commercial and then was demolished, unfortunately, after the 2011 earthquakes. And this new building came along. This Wynne Williams building is the pinnacle of civil engineering in its kind of sense of what? The structural part of it. It has concrete columns and wooden beams. And the whole idea behind that is it allows the building to dance freely in an earthquake, allowing that earthquake movement to flow through it without keeping it stiff and strong. It's actually supposed to rock back and forth in an earthquake and then come back together at the end. So each one of these wooden beams has a steel tendon that flows through it, and that acts like an elastic band in the event of shaking. So I like to think of it like this little giraffe toy that most people have. It can go like slack and move, but then when after the earthquake happens, it pulls that building back into place. So not only does it have this really cool elastic property to allow it to dance, I like to think of it, when we go on a dancing night, my partner dances a lot like this. I like to think of that building a lot like that. So in an earthquake, it just goes like this. But it has the steel tendons afterward to pull it back into place, so maybe when you start sobering, you're at that point. It also has base isolation. So it has this cool seismic gap, which we saw in the art gallery before. And this isn't going to start in the right place, so that's okay. Doesn't matter. Yeah. So that's kind of what the base isolation does I'm going to stop that because the building's about to fall. And that's not what I'm trying to show. So this has base isolation as well, but it's a different type. So this base isolation was actually invented by a Kiwi in the 70s. It's called lead rubber bearing. So it's got this lead core in the middle, which is supposed to deform and take a lot of that damage from the earthquake, and it's got this rubber around it to pull it back into place. So the building can move side by side again, but then it will come back into place with that rubber after shaking. And that seismic gap allows that building to move freely. There's also these tie downs in all four of the corners to make sure that the building doesn't topple over in any direction either. So it's a pretty cool building. It's unique, and this is the future of what the future of what buildings could be, is those kind of rocking frames. So moving on, we've gone from the Wynne Williams to the Civic building. So now we're at the Christchurch City Council, which does not base isolated. But after the earthquake, everybody had to evacuate the buildings because they didn't know if it was safe. The issue with that is it's our city council, and we kind of need that to rebuild the city. So what they did is they installed these accelerometers after the earthquake from Canterbury Seismic Instruments, and they put them throughout the entire building, and that checks shaking in the X, Y, and Z direction. Not only does it check the shaking, it compares it to the building code and checks, okay, so this is how much the building shook, this is how much the building is allowed to shake before it's damaged. And immediately, seconds after an earthquake, can tell you if the building is safe or not. So they've got it within that building, and it will tell you immediately whether it's white, amber, or red, and if you need to evacuate or you can stay in that building. And it's really helpful in places like the City Council where we actually need those people to continue working after an earthquake to keep the resilience alive within the city. So moving on, we are now going from the art gallery to the Wynne Williams to the Christchurch Civic Building to now we are in Pizza Tahori. So Pizza Tahori is a Ngai Tahu property. It's got two L-shaped buildings. This is Te Uruti and this is Iwako. And it is the center, so the whole area is called Pizza Tahori, and this is Ngā Mara o Te Wera, which is the gardens of Te Wera here. And quiz. What was the location prior to the Pizza Tahori Center? So what was it before? Was it the King Edward's Barracks? Was it the Christchurch Police Headquarters? Was it the Bloody Pa? Or was it all of the above? So A, B, C, D. Yeah, it was actually all of the above, and it's not going to show it, but it's all of the above. And the garden actually has a really amazing plaque that commemorates the Māori Pakeha connection of that land. And it's pretty amazing, so it's a really cool center to go to and read more about it. But, oh, I did that one. So back to Iwako. Iwako is the right building here. This is also base isolated, but there's no seismic gap around it because the base isolation is actually one floor up. So the first floor is not base isolated. The base isolation is actually here, and that's because it's close to the river and there's liquefaction and lots of other issues. So they actually did the base isolation. They're isolating the top floor buildings from the first floor, which means all the lifts and the staircases are also structurally connected from the top down. So I like to think of it like a chandelier or like Miley Cyrus and the Wrecking Ball. And you can actually go see the lifts at the Iwako. You can look and you can see a little gap and you can see how much it can swing in an earthquake. So don't recommend being on the staircase, but it would be a fun ride. You could do that. Almost done. So the last kind of piece is, which everybody sees all around Christchurch, are these cross bracings everywhere. So you'll see these cross bracings in pretty much every new building within Christchurch. They used to try to hide it, but the new architecture, you kind of want to show it off. So we see this cross bracing everywhere, and basically all that it's trying to do is you have the beams and the columns in a normal structure, and that's normally okay, because all you have on it is gravity. But when we have earthquakes, we get these shear forces moving the building side by side, and those squares or rectangles don't work very well. So we need to introduce triangles in there. So when we push it this way, this triangle will hold a lot of that load, and then same this way, that shear force will hold that side. So you'll see these cross bracing everywhere. It's one of the easiest ways to make things more earthquake resilient. So you'll see X bracing, V bracing, chevron bracing, eccentric bracing, lots of different fancy ones, but it's all doing pretty much the same thing. And the last stop, which you'll see, is the PwC Center. This building was designed right after the earthquake, and it's got cross bracing all over it. So if you want to see a good example of cross bracing, this is one. It was designed right after the earthquake, and it's to make people feel safe. It's also got buckling restraint braces, which I won't go too much, but it basically means it has a steel core with like this lubricant around it. And then it has a concrete around, so that is able to move freely within that concrete. And then, I didn't put that in there. All right, so thank you guys very much. Any questions? Don't make them too hard.
Are the base isolators replaced after earthquakes? Or do they take many earthquakes?
Not after earthquakes. They're replaced, I think, usually after 50 years, and it's usually for dust going in through them. They're pretty good, so they're low seismic damage design. So the whole point of these kind of the low damage designs is that you don't need to replace them, that you can keep going in the next day. And base isolators are a really good example. So it pulls into place. If there's a really major earthquake or one of them breaks, then yeah, we'll need to replace it. And they'll check after any major shaking to make sure that they're still okay. But the idea behind that is that you don't need to replace them, but they will still check to make sure. Same thing with a lot of the cross bracing and a lot of the other aspects of it as well. Good question though. Anyone else? Yeah.
What's the expense of the Christchurch City Council monitors they've got, and how do they keep their quality control of them?
Of those accelerometers? They're actually really cheap. So I've used the same service with Canterbury Seismic Instruments. I've got those same ones installed in 12 schools around the Alpine Faults, going from Invercargill all the way to Katamea, I guess is the most northern point, maybe Rye Valley. And that point is in the schools, and I can do the same thing, making sure those schools are safe after an earthquake. That's very cheap to put in. So they install it, the sensors are cheap, and I've got an app on my phone. Anytime there's an earthquake, I know that building is safe or not. If you give me a dollar amount, I don't really know. I think I get $1,000 to install it, and then I think there's a charge, they charge every year to keep it going. So it's pretty, and they actually have it installed in every city block to actually detect shaking within the entire CBD. So the shaking here versus 3 blocks that way is very different because the ground in Christchurch is very different. So it also monitors that. So it's actually not very expensive. It's pretty cheap.
A lot of these buildings were built like right after the earthquakes. Do you think this uptake of technologies has continued in the 10 years since?
Yeah, so working at the University of Canterbury, we've got amazing new technology for retrofitting, so going back into buildings. They're doing a lot of research right now with hollow core flooring in Wellington. I don't recommend Googling that because you'll never go to Wellington again. They're doing a lot of really amazing research, and it's just getting better and better with a lot of the things that they are understanding about earthquakes and earthquake resilient buildings. So yeah, definitely. And I didn't get into the heritage buildings part of it, but the heritage building is like a whole nother class of earthquake resilience because you can't physically show that it's been seismically restored. That's just part of being heritage. So part of that is hiding all that and being really creative on how you do that. So it's a whole nother field of engineering. Yeah. Thanks, Caleb. Any other questions? I think I'm over time, sorry.
No, keep going.
So, yeah.
Just a slightly grim question. What's the failure mode if the shear exceeds a certain amount beyond what the lateral forces?
I don't know. But
There's
I can.
plenty of people who can answer.
Yeah, I was going to say there's
I
probably
know
lots
you guys
of
have
answers.
designed something.
If nobody here can answer that, let me know when my bosses at the university can answer that for you. So, yeah.
Go on, I know you guys know.
It depends.
You also design it more than what you think you need.
Yeah.
So it's designed with a factor of safety, and then, I don't know, I've never actually designed one, but if anyone has other comments on it.
Yeah, the factor of safety within the new buildings is actually a lot higher than the current code. That being said, the code might change the next couple of years quite a lot. So yeah. And the good thing about Christchurch is that anything that would have fallen in an earthquake's already fallen before.